Knowledge from space. Scientists have deciphered the mysterious Mayan calendar and were amazed by the level of astronomy knowledge behind this. We know that the ancients had a tremendous amount of knowledge concerning astronomy. Let's remember the Antikythera mechanism that the ancient Greeks had. They had basically knowledge of every single eclipse, Earth, Moon, Sun, and they even knew the movements of the constellations. Why would they need to know that? They would need to know that because something was going on with their knowledge of astronomy that they had to keep track of. Now, concerning the Mayans, in the surviving books of the Maya, the mysterious principle of chronology was encrypted based on a cycle of 819 days. Most likely, everything that we do not know yet is something that we simply do not notice due to inattention. For example, once on a tour of the museum, the famous U.S. physicist Richard Feynman was one of the first to embrace the incomprehensible depths of the world of quantum physics. And going to museums was in no way part of his scientific interest, but he did his best to cultivate himself, quote unquote, in general was a sincerely curious person. So the scientist was interested in all these numerous points and lines. This is a fragment of one of the 78 pages of the famous ancient book of the Maya Indians, and it was written in the 13th century on paper from ficus bark, since it became famous after the Dresden Library bought it in 18th century. It is now called the Dresden Codex. As Feynman later told his friends, he bought a printed copy of the code, came to the hotel, began to meticulously count all these points, and very quickly discovered that there was a logic to it. It all comes down to certain numbers, and then one suspicion crept into his mind. He compared these numbers with some parameters of the movement of celestial bodies and realized that these Mayan Indians were excellent astronomers. Of course, many scientists, except for Feynman, have deciphered and continue to decipher the Dresden Codex, as well as other Mayan documents, and all kinds of inscriptions on their temples. A careful comparison of some details led the researchers to the conclusion that this civilization led some other unknown calendar in addition to those that are already known. It's known that they had two main calendars, one mundane, 365 plus days, 18 months of 20 days, plus 5 more days at the end of the year for good measure. The second is special, sacred, and very ingenious. There are 260 days numbered from 1 to 13, and the symbolic names of these days are repeated with a period of not 13 days but 20. It turned out that the Maya had a third way to count days, and it is so complex that comprehending it in the 21st century is a real challenge to science. In fact, all that is given in this problem is that the main cycle in the mysterious calendar lasts 819 days. But why exactly 819 days? One can only guess. At that time, 819 days is one of the 4 equal parts of a large circle with a total of 3,276 days. What almost immediately came to the mind of the scientists is that 3,276 days is 9 times 364 days. You could say almost 9 years, but again, what happened in the world of the Mayan Indians every 9 years? On this account, there was a space version. In fact, nothing perhaps remarkable happened every 3,276 days, but it was just the most convenient number. Convenient for what? It was easy to divide it into cycles of travel of several different celestial bodies at once through the night sky. We're talking about the so-called synodic period, the period after which the celestial body is exactly in the same position in the sky. This is not the period of revolution, say, of a planet around the sun, but the period of its sometimes intricate movement across the sky, the period of apparent movement. Actually, the planet goes around in a circle, well, on an eclipse, and we see that it goes, let's say, in one direction, then in another direction. We remember the legendary retrograde Mercury, It's clear that a planet in its orbit always moves in the same direction, but it regularly seems to us that it is flying backwards because we're also moving together with the Earth and we are not moving synchronously with Mercury. Earth has its own speed, Mercury has its own speed. It is these observations of the visible motion of the planets which probably form the basis of the calendar. If, for example, we take the synodic period of the same Mercury, then it amounts to no less than 116 days. Multiply by 7 and we get 812, very close. Venus, 583 days. It's more complicated here, but it can also be synchronized. The 7 synodic periods of the morning star, Venus that is, are almost 5 times 819 days. Jupiter, 398 days. 39 times 398 is almost 19 times 819. With Saturn, it's generally perfectly clear. It has this apparent cycle of movement of 378 days, and 13 times 378 is exactly 6 times 819. In principle, the person who used this calendar could take any planet as a basis and count the days in accordance with its movement across the sky. If you bring it under the moon, it's 3,276 days, equal to 30 times 27.3 days, 30 lunar months. Isn't that amazing? They must have been so tremendously advanced, not only in astronomy, I believe also in mathematics. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Finally, support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box below.